Very good evening to one and all present here. Today we are going to discuss about the management of hyperkalemia. So we have already discussed in the previous session of hypokalemia. The potassium homeostasis is maintained in the body by three basic buffering system. One is the transcellular shift and renal buffering system by epithelial sodium channel and Roentgen channel at the level of DCT, and the colonic buffering system by the PK channels in the colonic crypts. So normally, when do we call the patient is having hyperkalemia? When the patient's serum potassium is more than 5.5, we are calling it as mild hyperkalemia. When it is more than 6.5, it is moderate, and more than 8 is called as severe hyperkalemia. So we have already discussed that potassium is the main cation responsible for the excitability of the tissue. So whenever there is excessive potassium, there will be hyperexcitability of all tissues present in our body. So this mechanism mainly explains the clinical features associated with the hyperkalemia. So what are the common presentation of the patient with the hyperkalemia? There will be excessive hyperexcitability of the muscle, nerve and cardiac tissue. So there will be excessive paresthesia, fasciculation, and at last the patient may have ascending paralysis, and patient may end up in having the flaccid quadriplegia. But most of the time the complication of hyperkalemia is excessive activity of cardiac hyperexcitability. So this is the most common cause of death related to hyperkalemia, because of excitable tissues are more activated in the cardiac myocytes. So we are having the different set of ECG changes in hyperkalemia, which will be discussed in our ECG section. And these patients usually may be having acute or chronic hyperkalemia. Patient with acute hyperkalemia may have the ECG changes even at 6 milliequivalents of potassium, but patient with hyperkalemia because of chronic causes may have the ECG changes even after 8 milliequivalents of potassium. So the common ECG changes are loss of P wave, ST segment depression, then finally sine wave pattern, and mostly it is mimicking NSTEMI, bradyarrhythmias. So in any cardiac patient with the various ECG presentation, always have the possibility of hyperkalemia to be ruled out in any type of cardiac patients. So hyperkalemia has to be corrected immediately to avoid the cardiac related death in any patients. So what are the basic mechanism behind the causes of hyperkalemia? So we have discussed the basic buffering system. So the hyperkalemia can be because of increased in dietary potassium, or it can be decreased potassium excretion, or excessive efflux at transcellular level. So the three basics buffering system is altered, which will lead to the development of hyperkalemia in these patients. So the first one is dietary excess. This is the least possible type causing the hyperkalemia. Why? Because normally functioning kidney can handle potassium intake of even up to 12 gram per day. So we have already discussed that renal system is buffering the potassium level, so it can increases the potassium secretion based on the dietary potassium intake. So when you are taking excessive potassium but your functioning kidney and the colon is normal, you can have normal potassium homeostasis by normal mechanism. But when the patient is having the kidney disease like AKI or CKD, these patients, when you are giving the excessive potassium rich diet, these patients may develop hyperkalemia on long-term basis. So what are the commonly available potassium rich diet? Coconut water, tomato, caffeine, dark chocolates, dried fruits. So this consumption is associated with the hyperkalemia in patients with the underlying kidney disease. This explains that any patients with the acute renal failure will be presenting with the hyperkalemia immediately. So any AKI with the oliguria having the possibility of development of hyperkalemia immediately. But patients with the chronic kidney disease, there will be compensatory metabolism at the level of colon, which increasing the potassium secretion. So in CKD patients, we may develop hyperkalemia on long-term basis only. But this acute compensatory mechanism is not active in case of acute renal failure, where the patient will be developing hyperkalemia immediately. So the next mechanism of hyperkalemia is either at the level of transcellular shift or renal or extrarenal potassium secretion. So whenever there is a increased efflux of potassium at the level of transcellular, there will be hyperkalemia. So this is explained by the normal mechanism. Normally the sodium potassium ATPase is causing the potassium influx into the cells. Whenever there is a decreased activity of sodium potassium ATPase, these patients will be having excessive potassium in the extracellular compartment. So we have already discussed this. Normally sodium potassium ATPase activity is increased by insulin, epinephrine, beta 2 agonist activity. So whenever there is a insulin deficiency, there will be decreased activity. These patients will be having the hyperkalemia. This explains the hyperkalemia in patients with the diabetic ketoacidosis. Same ways, the patients with the metabolic acidosis will be having hyperkalemia. So this can be explained by the basic mechanism. Whenever there is a metabolic acidosis, there will be excessive level of H+ in the extracellular fluids, which causing the activation of the hydrogen sodium antipode. So the sodium will be pumped out to the extracellular compartment. So there will be creation of positive transmembrane potential in the extracellular compartment, which will turn inhibiting the sodium potassium ATPase activity. So this will lead to the accumulation of potassium in the extracellular compartment. So whenever the patient is having metabolic acidosis, there will be high possibility of having the hyperkalemia. So the drugs causing metabolic acidosis or any patients with HACMA or NACMA, that is high anion gap metabolic acidosis or normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, will be having hyperkalemia. Same ways, this explains the drugs like thalidomide and sevalimer. These drugs will be causing the metabolic acidosis, which in turn causing hyperkalemia in these patients. So digoxin normally activated by inhibiting the sodium potassium ATPase. So the most common side effect of digoxin is hyperkalemia because of the decreased activity of sodium potassium ATPase. So the next mechanism is whenever there is a cell injury, all the intracellular potassium will be shifted to the extracellular compartment, because potassium is the mostly intracellular cation. Around 150 milliequivalents of potassium is present in the intracellular compartment. Whenever there is a cell injury, there will be excessive release of potassium into the extracellular compartment. So anything related to cell injury like rhabdomyolysis, because most of the intracellular potassium is stored in the muscle. And MI, which is the second common source of potassium, liver injury, RBC lysis, and bone marrow disorders, patients with having burns, trauma, RTA, and excessive thrombosis, which is again activated with the activation of fibrin degradation system, platelet aggregation and platelet lysis, and tumor lysis syndrome. In all these patients, patient is having excessive cell turnover, which will lead to the excessive release of intracellular potassium. So these patients will be having the hyperkalemia transient. This is the most common mechanism behind the transient hyperkalemia. So the transcellular shift is associated with the hyperkalemia rather than hypokalemia in most of the patients, and if this is transient, it can be easily correctable if the underlying etiology is identified. And there is a terminology called pseudo hyperkalemia. This is also explained by the same mechanism. Whenever we are drawing the blood from the patients for lab investigation, we are using the small pore needles, or the patients may be asked to making the fist on the hand, or we will be using the tourniquet. These things will be having the transient cell damage. So this will be associated with the elevated level of potassium in the laboratory investigations. So these things has to be ruled out before the categorizing the patients to have hyperkalemia. And the third mechanism is decreased potassium secretion. So it can be renal or extrarenal. So mostly the decreased potassium secretion is associated with the renal. So we have already explained that 90% of the potassium is excreted by the kidney and only 10% is excreted at the level of colon. So the disease affecting the colonic system will not be resulting in manifestation of hyperkalemia, but any disease affecting the renal system, there will be high possibility of early development of hyperkalemia. In kidney, there are three basic mechanisms, and the first mechanism is decreased distal sodium delivery. So whenever there is a decreased distal sodium delivery, the sodium chloride co-transporter in the DCT1 will be activated. So this will increases the sodium reabsorption to compensate the sodium loss, but this will inhibiting the epithelial sodium channels. So because the epithelial sodium channel is not activated, the normal ROMK activation will be inhibited in these patients. So potassium is not secreted. This is exactly opposite to the development of hypokalemia, where the basic underlying mechanism is excessive delivery of sodium to the distal DCT. So this is the basic mechanism in patient developing acute renal failure. So whenever there is acute renal failure, there will be decreased GFR. This in turn lead to the decreased distal sodium delivery. So finally the ROMK channel is inhibited. So these patients will be having hyperkalemia immediately on the onset of acute renal failure. And the second mechanism is aldosterone or cortisol deficiency. So the epithelial sodium channel is having the receptor for both cortisol as well as aldosterone. So the epithelial sodium channel has to be activated to activation of ROMK channel, which is the main potassium channel, that is the renal outer medullary potassium channel, causing the potassium secretion to the tubular fluid. whenever there is a decreased activity of epithelial sodium channel because of cortisol deficiency or aldosterone deficiency, there will be decreased activity of ROMK channel. The patients will be having decreased potassium secretion, which will land up in the patient having hyperkalemia. So this explains the hyperkalemia in patients with Addison's disease and cortisol deficiency, acute stress status, like that. And the patients with the diabetic mellitus because of insulin deficiency will be having hyperkalemia. And patient with the chronic kidney diseases, there will be even compensatory shift at the level of colon and muscle level. These patients will be developing hyperkalemia on long-term basis. And the final one is Gordon syndrome. This is the rare cause of hyperkalemia, but this is the cause associated with hyperkalemia and hypertension. In hypokalemia section, we have discussed that patients with dietary rich potassium can be associated with the reduction of blood pressure. But there is a possibility of hyperkalemia and hypertension because of the syndrome called pseudo hypoaldosteronism. This is because of WNK1. So renal specific WNK1 mutation. This channel is activating the ROMK channel. So whenever there is a loss of function of mutation in RSWNK1 gene, there will be inhibition of the ROMK channel. So these patients will be having hyperkalemia. At the same time, these patients will be having excessive activity of epithelial sodium channel. So normally the WNK1 gene will be inhibiting the epithelial sodium channel, but because of the loss of function, the epithelial sodium channels will be overactivated. There will be excessive sodium reabsorption. This will result in patients to have hypertension. And the second type is type 1 pseudo hypoaldosteronism. This is because of aldosterone resistance at the level of epithelial sodium channels. So these patients will be having even the patients with hyperaldosteronism, patients will be having pseudo hypoaldosteronism features like hyperelemia, and the patients may be having development of hypertension. So these are the various mechanisms behind the development of hyperkalemia. So we have discussed the manifestation of hyperkalemia in these patients. So the last mechanism is drugs causing hyperkalemia, which has to be understood in depth, because most of the routine drugs prescribed for the volume overload status like AC inhibitors, ARBs are associated with the development of hyperkalemia. We have already discussed the basic 3 drugs like digoxin, thalidomide and sevelamer is associated with metabolic acidosis and development of hyperkalemia. So to understand the basic, the normal system controlling the potassium metabolism is renin, angiotensin converting enzyme, angiotensin 2, aldosterone, which act on the epithelial sodium channel. So the drugs that inhibiting the renin secretion, like anything inhibiting at the level of renin, patients will be having hyperkalemia. So NSAIDs, beta blockers, calcineurin inhibitors will inhibiting the glomerular juxtamedullary renin release, because beta 1 secretion is associated with the renin's release, as well as prostaglandin E2 is associated with the renin secretion, and NSAID is inhibiting the prostaglandin E2, beta blocker inhibiting the beta 2 agonist action, and calcineurin inhibitor act at the renal juxtamedullary apparatus. So there will be release or decreased release of renin, which is associated with hyperkalemia in these drugs. And the second one is ACE inhibitors and ARB blockers. So aldosterone receptor blockers act at the level of angiotensin 2 activity. So either ARB blockers or ACE inhibitors causing the patients to have hyperkalemia. And next one is aldosterone. Normally the aldosterone activity is inhibited by heparin and ketoconazole. So these drugs can cause patient to have hyperkalemia, and the aldosterone antagonists like spironolactone and eplerenone activating at the level of aldosterone receptors, especially the epithelial sodium channel and other aldosterone receptors, which will turn leads to the hyperkalemia, because aldosterone is the main organ responsible for the potassium secretion. We have already discussed that potassium homeostasis is controlled by means of secretion, not reabsorption. Whenever there is a decreased secretion, there will be excessive potassium in the body. So the potassium has to be secreted to maintain the potassium balance. So these drugs will inhibiting the renin RAS system, which will in turn land up in patients having hyperkalemia. Then finally, the epithelial sodium channel inhibitors like amiloride and triamterene, trimethoprim. So these drugs will be inhibiting the epithelial sodium channel, which in turn causing the decreased activity of epithelial sodium channel, and finally it will inhibiting the ROMK channel. The patient used to have hyperkalemia. So these are the common drugs to be monitored before treating the patients to have hyperkalemia. So whenever we are prescribing these drugs to the patient, we need to follow some basic things in these patients. The first one is always assess the renal function before starting these kind of drugs in these patients. So discontinue the drugs that interfere with the renal potassium secretion like herbal preparation or NSAIDs, which selectively inhibiting the cyclooxygenase inhibitor. And patients with the basic underlying kidney disease has to be given with low potassium diet, and these patients can be prescribed for thiazide or loop diuretics for the antihypertensive effect rather than AC inhibitor or ARBs. If the patient need to be given for AC and ARB inhibitors, the patient's potassium has to be monitored, and the patient's potassium should be less than 5.5 to start the patients on AC inhibitors and ARBs. If the patient need to be started on spironolactone, it should not exceed more than 25 milligram per daily along with AC inhibitor or ARBs. Even when in any conditions, if the patient's potassium crossing 5.6, we need to stop all these kind of drugs in any patients with underlying renal disease, because patients with underlying renal disease cannot handle the potassium in the body, so which will end up in patients to have hyperkalemia related immediate cardiac arrest. So what is the treatment for hyperkalemia? So the basic thing is we need to stop the hyperexcitability of the cardiac tissue. So first we need to stabilize the patient with the calcium gluconate. So being the positive ion, it is decreasing the hyperexcitability of both cardiac as well as neuromuscular junction. So give 10% calcium gluconate 10 ml over 10 minutes immediately. So whenever the patient with having ECG changes of sine wave or bradyarrhythmia, patients to have absent P waves, immediately give the patients for calcium gluconate, which will be the life-saving treatment in these patients. So this effect will be started to have within 10 to 15 minutes and will be lasting for 2 to 4 hours. So we have to repeat the calcium gluconate tediously if the patient persistent to have hyperkalemia. And next mechanism is activating the potassium influx. So we need to activate the sodium potassium ATPase channel present in the muscles to shift the extracellular potassium to intracellular compartment. So this has to be achieved immediately. So we have already known that insulin and beta 2 agonist are the common physiological mechanism behind the activation of sodium potassium ATPase. So you can give the patients with the insulin and glucose to cause the transcellular shift of potassium. So we can start the patient on 10 unit insulin with 50 gram of glucose, that is around 200 ml of 25% dextrose. Patient will be having decreased potassium level of 2 to 3 milliequivalents in 1 hour. How it is effective? The range is around 1 to 2 milliequivalents. But these patient has to be given glucose along with insulin, because insulin will causes the potassium shift with the glucose. So if you are giving the patients without glucose, the patient will be land up in having hypoglycemia, which is more detrimental for the patient. So always give the insulin along with the glucose, even the patient is having diabetes, to correct the hyperkalemia. The next one is beta 2 agonist, which can be given as inhalational or intravenous. So we commonly used drug is salbutamol. So 20 milligram of salbutamol in 4 ml of NS can be given inhalation every 2 to 3 hours. This will reduce the potassium by 1 to 2 milliequivalents. So we have tried 3 basic mechanisms: calcium gluconate, insulin and beta 2 agonist. But the patient is still having hyperkalemia. So the last resort will be sodium bicarbonate. How it is helping? So sodium bicarbonate is having the bicarbonate which causing metabolic alkalosis. So metabolic alkalosis will activate the sodium potassium ATPase and shift of the extracellular potassium into the intracellular compartment. But giving the sodium bicarbonate having the side effects of hypernatremia, volume overload, hypocalcemia. So we need to give the patients with resistant hyperkalemia only. So don't routinely use sodium bicarbonate in all the patients. And if the patient is having the renal tubular acidosis or NAGMA, we can start the patient on sodium bicarbonate in the initial phase itself, because the underlying mechanism in these patients is metabolic acidosis. By correcting the metabolic acidosis with the help of sodium bicarbonate will be helpful in treating the hyperkalemia immediately in these type of patients. So patients with the metabolic acidosis can be given sodium bicarbonate in the initial phase itself. And the final resort is dialysis. So if the patient is having the resistant hyperkalemia, we need to go for hemodialysis. So this is one of the common indication for patients to have hemodialysis in the acute emergency settings. So if the patient cannot be prescribed for hemodialysis, they can be started on peritoneal dialysis also. And patients with CKD, there will be high possibility of chronic hyperkalemia. So for the treatment of chronic hyperkalemia, we need to reduce the potassium reabsorption. That means we need to increase the potassium excretion at colon. For that we are using the K binders. So K binders are the drugs which will be bind to the secreted potassium at the level of colon by creating the transcellular potential difference. By binding the all secreted potassium, it will increases the potassium PK channel activity in the colonic cells, so which will turn causing the excessive loss of potassium at the level of colon. So the commonly used drug is Kayexalate, because of increased side effect profiles, these drugs has been withdrawn from the market. And recently we are having two common drugs like Patromer and sodium zirconium cyclosilicate. So hyperkalemia is the most common emergency. We need to treat hyperkalemia immediately. So the various causes of hyperkalemia has to be considered in all the patient. Always consider pseudo hyperkalemia and drugs being the most common causes, and the transient cellular shift, and finally patients with underlying kidney diseases are the common causes of hyperkalemia. Thank you.